I wrote melodies to the songs and I liked them. And subsequently, we got a songwriting contract with Dick James, who published the Beatles.
When Elton John speaks about music, the world listens. With a career spanning more than 5 decades, over 300 million records sold, and a catalog of songs that have become the soundtrack to countless lives, he stands as one of the most influential artists in modern history. From the piano ballads that defined the 1970s to the stadium anthems that still fill arenas today, his impact on popular music cannot be overstated. So when Elton recently revealed his 7 all-time favorite musicians, the announcement carried weight that few such lists ever do. This was not a casual ranking made for entertainment. These were the artists who shaped him, challenged him, inspired him, and in some cases, wounded him deeply. Each name on this list represents a chapter in Elton's extraordinary life, complete with triumphs, conflicts, and emotions that he has rarely discussed so openly. What emerged from this revelation surprised even those who thought they knew Elton best. The choices themselves sparked intense discussion across the music industry. Some artists who expected recognition found themselves absent. Others who made the list had complicated histories with Elton that few fans fully understood. The conversations that followed exposed relationships far more nuanced than the public ever realized. Throughout his career, Elton has collaborated with virtually every major figure in popular music. He has mentored emerging talent, duet with legends, and built friendships that have weathered decades of change. His influence extends across generations, touching artists from wildly different genres and backgrounds. When someone in his stature identifies the musicians who matter most to him, it offers a rare window into the soul of a man who has given so much of himself through his music. What makes this countdown particularly revealing is not just who made the list, but what Elton shared about each relationship. He spoke with unusual candor about the bonds that shaped him, the rivalries that push him, and the losses that still haunt him. From mentorship and admiration to jealousy and heartbreak, these 7 choices trace the emotional landscape of an artist who has experienced every extreme the music industry can offer. Beginning at number 7 and working toward the artist who claims the top position, this journey through Elton's favorites tells a story that goes far beyond simple musical appreciation. It reveals the human being behind the sequined costumes and spectacular performances. It shows vulnerability where we might expect confidence. It exposes wounds that fame and success could never heal. Lady Gaga holds the 7th position, and her presence on this list illuminates one of the more complex relationships in Elton's recent life. When Gaga first emerged onto the music scene, Elton recognized something extraordinary in her. He saw an artist unafraid to push boundaries, to challenge conventions, to demand attention through sheer force of creativity and will. In many ways, he saw reflections of his younger self. The connection between them developed quickly and intensely. Elton took on a mentorship role, offering guidance drawn from his own experiences navigating the treacherous waters of sudden fame. He watched with pride as Gaga transformed from a promising newcomer into a global phenomenon. Their bond seemed unshakable, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. There was a moment when Australian media reported tension between them, suggesting Elton had expressed concern about Gaga's well-being. When asked about these reports, Elton dismissed them directly, stating he had no concerns about Lady Gaga whatsoever. The story, he suggested, had been manufactured from nothing substantial. Yet those close to Elton describe a relationship that has evolved in ways that sometimes leave him uncertain. As Gaga's star rose ever higher, the dynamics naturally shifted. She was no longer the newcomer seeking guidance, but fully realized artist commanding her own empire. The frequency of their communication changed. The nature of their connection transformed. This evolution, while entirely natural, carried emotional weight for Elton. He had invested in not just professional support, but genuine love in their relationship. When the intensity of contact diminished, he reportedly struggled to understand why. Those who know him well suggest he sometimes interprets distance as rejection, a pattern rooted in experiences from long before his fame. Industry observers note that Gaga faced a difficult balance. Establishing her own artistic identity required stepping out from under the shadow of any mentor, no matter how beloved. She needed the world to see her as a standalone force rather than someone who had been shaped by Elton John. This necessary separation, while not personal in intent, may have felt personal in impact. Elton continues to speak publicly about Gaga's brilliance with obvious sincerity. He describes her as fearless, as possessed of extraordinary talent, as an artist who belongs in the company of the greats. His admiration appears genuine and undiminished regardless of whatever private complexities exist between them. Her inclusion on this list perhaps serves multiple purposes. It acknowledges her artistic significance while also extending an olive branch, reminding her in the world of a bond that meant everything to him. Some relationships cannot be neatly categorized as healthy or broken. They simply exist in spaces of ambiguity, shaped by love and distance in equal measure. Eminem claims the sixth position, and this choice illuminates one of the most courageous stands Elton has ever taken. In the early 2000s, Eminem faced intense criticism from advocacy groups who accused his lyrics of promoting homophobia. The controversy reached a fever pitch, threatening to derail the career of one of hip-hop's most talented voices. Elton's response shocked nearly everyone. Rather than join the chorus of condemnation or simply remaining silent, he defended Eminem publicly and then agreed to perform with him at the Grammy Awards. For a gay man who had fought for acceptance throughout his life, this seemed to many an inexplicable betrayal. When asked to explain his position, Elton spoke with characteristic directness. He had listened to the entire Marshall Mathers album while driving to a performance in Southampton. Rather than hearing hatred, he heard artistry. He heard a voice channeling characters and experiences with raw honesty. He heard something authentic beneath the provocative surface. The Grammy performance became a cultural flashpoint. Elton and Eminem stood together on that stage, offering a visual rebuke to those who insisted they should be enemies. The image of these two artists, supposedly representing opposing forces, united in musical collaboration, carried power that transcended the immediate controversy. The cost of this stand was significant. Elton reportedly lost friendships over his defense of Eminem. Activists who had long supported him felt betrayed. Some within his own community questioned his judgment and his loyalty. He received threatening messages from those who felt he had crossed an unforgivable line. Yet Elton never wavered. His willingness to sacrifice relationships and reputation for an artist he believed in demonstrated a principle that has guided his entire life. He values authenticity over approval. He trusts his own judgment, even when the entire world disagrees. He refuses to condemn artistry simply because it makes people uncomfortable. The bond between Elton and Eminem that emerged from this controversy has proven remarkably durable. They maintain regular contact, exchanging messages with genuine warmth. Eminem has expressed his gratitude in various ways over the years, never forgetting the man who stood beside him when standing alone might have been safer. This relationship highlights something essential about Elton's character. He does not form attachments based on how others perceive him. He follows his instincts toward people whose artistry moves him, regardless of whether those connections make sense to outside observers. George Michael occupies the fifth position, and speaking about him requires Elton to navigate grief that is never fully resolved. When George died on Christmas Day in 2016, Elton lost not just a fellow artist, but someone who had been woven into the fabric of his life for decades. Their friendship defied simple description. It encompassed tremendous love, fierce arguments, painful estrangements, and joyful reconciliations. They understood each other in ways that only those who have experienced similar levels of fame and similar personal struggles can truly understand. They shared burdens that outsiders could never fully appreciate. Elton watched George battle demons throughout the years of their friendship. The same sensitivity that made George such a remarkable artist also left him vulnerable to forces that ultimately consumed him. Elton wanted desperately to help, but often found himself pushed away by someone unwilling or unable to accept the support being offered. Those who witnessed their dynamic recall an intensity that could turn volatile without warning. One encounter in 2011 reportedly escalated into a screaming match before George stormed out. Yet these explosions never severed the underlying connection. They always found their way back to each other eventually. Since George's passing, Elton has struggled to speak about him without visible emotion. Those who visit his home notice photographs of the two of them together displayed prominently. Songs that evoke memories of George reportedly stop Elton in his tracks. sometimes derailing recording sessions as the weight of loss overwhelms him. The placement of George at number 5 reflects not a ranking of talent, but perhaps the pain associated with remembering. Speaking about George means confronting questions that have no satisfying answers. Could more have been done? Were opportunities for intervention missed? Does surviving carry its own particular guilt when someone you love did not? This friendship reminds us that brilliance offers no protection against darkness. Two of the most gifted artists of their generation shared a bond that could not ultimately save one of them. Elton carries this loss with him constantly, a wound that time has softened but never healed. Freddie Mercury commands a 4th position, and this choice requires acknowledging a rivalry that both men understood even if they rarely discussed it directly. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, Elton and Freddie stood as two of rock's most flamboyant figures. They moved in similar circles, commanded similar audiences, and projected larger-than-life personas that invited comparison. When Elton speaks of first encountering Freddie, his wonder remains evident. He describes meeting someone unlike anyone he had known before. The humor, the gift, the sheer scale of personality, all of it left an impression that decades have not diminished. Freddie represented something extraordinary, a force of nature who seemed to operate by different rules than ordinary mortals. Yet alongside this admiration existed something more complicated. Those aware of dynamics between them understood an unspoken competition pulsing beneath the surface. Both men wanted to be the most spectacular presence in any room. Both possessed egos commensurate with their talents. Neither was inclined to yield the spotlight gracefully. One particular backstage encounter in 1977 crystallized this tension. Witnesses recall Freddie making a pointed observation about Elton's elaborate costumes, suggesting perhaps he was trying too hard. The comment landed with unexpected force. Elton reportedly felt genuinely wounded and maintained distance from Freddie for an extended period afterward. This dynamic reveals something important about life at the highest levels of artistic achievement. Mutual respect and competitive tension can coexist within the same relationship. Elton genuinely admired Freddie's 4-octave vocal range and his supernatural command of stadium audiences. He also measured himself against these gifts and sometimes found himself wanting. Those familiar with Elton's approach to his craft note how carefully he studied Mercury's vocal techniques. He sought to expand his own capabilities by understanding what made Freddie so extraordinary. This was not imitation, but rather the dedication of a serious artist determined to maximize his own potential. A vocal coach who worked with Elton during this period reportedly offered an assessment that captured the dynamic perfectly. Elton was brilliant, truly brilliant, but Freddie existed on another plane entirely. This observation, while meant as simple honesty, touched on the complicated feelings that great artists harbor toward their peers. Despite the competitive undercurrents, Elton's respect for Freddie has only deepened with time. Distance and mortality have a way of clarifying what truly matters. The rivalry that once generated tension now simply serves as evidence that both men operated at rarefied heights where few others could follow. John Lennon claims a 3rd position, a choice that exposes vulnerability Elton rarely displays publicly. For someone who came of age worshiping the Beatles, proximity to Lennon represented the fulfillment of adolescent dreams. Getting to know his hero should have been purely joyful. Instead, it carried pain that still resonates decades later. The wound came unexpectedly. In a 1974 radio interview, Lennon dismissed Elton's songwriting in terms that left no room for misinterpretation. He characterized it as overproduced commercial garbage, the kind of mainstream product that represented everything Lennon claimed to reject. The criticism was public, specific, and devastating. Those who knew Elton at the time described the impact of hearing those words. He had not expected universal praise, but this attack came from someone whose approval mattered more than almost anyone else's. The pain was not merely professional, but deeply personal. His hero had looked at his life's work and found it worthless. The immediate aftermath was difficult. Elton reportedly withdrew, canceling appearances while processing rejection. The man who seemed to have everything found himself questioning his fundamental worth as an artist. If John Lennon thought he was producing garbage, perhaps John Lennon was right. Time eventually brought reconciliation. The two developed a genuine friendship that allowed for honest conversation about their earlier tension. Lennon acknowledged that his criticism had been unnecessarily harsh, shaped perhaps by his own struggles during that chaotic period of his life. The apology was offered and accepted, yet some wounds leave scars regardless of healing. Elton has admitted that he never entirely forgot the pain of those initial words. They became part of the psychological landscape, a reminder that admiration flows in one direction and approval is never guaranteed. The hero worship he felt for the Beatles could not protect him from being dismissed by one of them. The profound influence of the Beatles on Elton's songwriting remains obvious to anyone who listens carefully. He absorbed their innovations, studied their craftsmanship, and incorporated their lessons into his own distinctive approach. This debt has never been hidden. Elton still reportedly plays their songs privately, a man in his 70s returning to music that first showed him what was possible. Lennon's presence at number 3 reflects this complicated inheritance. We can love our heroes and be wounded by them simultaneously. We can learn everything from someone while nursing grievances that never fully resolve. The relationships that shape us most profoundly are rarely simple. Bernie Taupin holds the second position, and this choice requires reckoning with a partnership that has defined both men's lives for over half a century. The collaboration between Elton John and Bernie Taupin stands as one of the most successful and enduring in popular music history. Bernie writes the lyrics. Elton composes the music. Together they have created songs that have become part of our collective consciousness. From the outside, this partnership might appear harmonious, two halves of the perfect creative whole working in seamless cooperation. The reality, as those close to them understand, is considerably more turbulent. 50 years of intense collaboration have produced not just extraordinary music, but also explosive conflicts that have threatened to end everything more than once. The creative process that produces their best work also generates tremendous friction. Bernie pours his soul into lyrics that represent his deepest thoughts and experiences. Elton interprets these words through his own musical sensibility, sometimes in ways that align perfectly with Bernie's intentions, and sometimes in ways that diverge significantly. Recording sessions have occasionally erupted into confrontations that shock witnesses. One particularly heated exchange in 1985 reportedly involved raised voices, thrown objects, and explicit threats to terminate the partnership permanently. Those present described genuine fury on both sides, accumulated frustrations boiling over into chaos. Yet they always return to each other. The magic they create together cannot be replicated with anyone else. Elton has worked with other lyricists occasionally, but nothing matches what happens when he sits at the piano with Bernie's words before him. Bernie has seen his lyrics interpreted by other composers, but no one transforms them into music the way Elton does. This mutual dependence is both a gift and a burden. Elton has reportedly acknowledged feeling trapped sometimes by the relationship, tired of only singing Bernie's words, yet unable to imagine singing anyone else's. Bernie experiences similar ambivalence, frustrated when Elton's musical choices seem to miss his lyrical intentions, yet knowing that no other collaboration would yield anything comparable. Observers describe their dynamic as resembling a long marriage with all the complexity that comparison implies. There is love that is proven unshakable across decades. There is also resentment that surfaces periodically, grievances accumulated over years of intense interdependence. Contract negotiations reportedly become emotional affairs, business discussions colored by the weight of shared history. What sustains them is perhaps the simple recognition that they are better together than apart. Whatever frustrations the partnership generates pale against what produces. Songs that have defined eras, performances that have moved millions, a body of work that will endure long after both men are gone. Bernie's placement at number 2 acknowledges a truth that Elton understands better than anyone. His career, his legacy, his identity as an artist are inseparable from this collaboration. Bernie is not just a favorite musician, but an essential part of who Elton John has become. David Bowie claims the number 1 position, and this choice exposes perhaps the deepest emotional wound in Elton's remarkable life. To understand why Bowie stands atop this list requires understanding something that might surprise those who know only Elton's public confidence. Throughout his career, Elton has longed for connection with those he admires. He loves deeply and sometimes too intensely, He wanted to be close to people who inspire him. Bowie inspired Elton more than almost anyone else. The fearless reinvention, the artistic courage, the willingness to exist at the cutting edge regardless of commercial consequences. Everything about Bowie represented qualities that Elton admired and sometimes felt he lacked in himself. The problem was that Bowie never fully reciprocated the desire for closeness. Those who observed their interactions over years describe an asymmetry that caused Elton genuine pain. He pursued friendship with enthusiasm that Bowie apparently found overwhelming. Where Elton wanted intimacy, Bowie preferred distance. One party during the height of their respective careers crystallized this dynamic. Witnesses heard Bowie make an observation that cut to the heart of the matter. He suggested that Elton tried too hard to be liked, that this eagerness was draining to be around. The comment was not necessarily meant cruelly, but it devastated Elton nonetheless. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Elton issued countless invitations. He wanted Bowie at his events, his parties, his life. Bowie occasionally appeared but rarely stayed long, departing with minimal interaction while Elton watched, visibly disappointed. The rejection was never explicit, never dramatic, just a persistent coolness that prevented the friendship Elton craved. Elton's response to this distance took a particular form. He began acquiring Bowie memorabilia with an intensity that those close to him found notable. He bid on costumes, artwork, personal items, anything connected to the artist he could not reach personally. His collection grew into one of the largest private assemblages of Bowie material in the world, representing millions of dollars spent chasing connection through objects. Publicly, Elton never wavered in his praise. He called Bowie the greatest artist of their generation. He credited him with changing music forever. He spoke of him with reverence that bordered on awe. The admiration was genuine and unreserved, offered freely regardless of whether it would ever be returned. Bowie apparently struggled to reciprocate. When asked about Elton in interviews, his responses tended toward the perfunctory. He acknowledged Elton's success without offering the kind of personal warmth that would have meant everything to its recipient. Attempts to arrange collaborations reportedly failed because Bowie preferred working with edgier, younger artists and viewed Elton as too mainstream for his artistic direction. These rejections accumulated over years, creating a wound that success could never heal. Elton questioned his own artistic credibility. If Bowie saw him as merely commercial, as lacking the edge that characterized true artistry, perhaps that perception was accurate. The man who sold 300 million records sometimes wondered if any of it really mattered. Placing Bowie at number one serves multiple purposes. It acknowledges genuine artistic admiration. It honors an influence that shaped Elton's approach to performance and reinvention, but it also exposes vulnerability that the public rarely sees. Elton loved Bowie from a distance, wanted desperately to be his peer and his friend, and never received the validation he sought. This unrequited artistic love affair reveals something universal about the human experience. We all carry relationships defined by asymmetry, connections where our investment exceeds what we receive in return. Fame and success provide no immunity from these imbalances. If anything, they amplify them by raising the stakes of every interaction. Elton's choices across this list trace the full range of what human connection can mean. There is mentorship that evolves in unexpected directions. There is loyalty that costs relationships and reputation. There is grief that time cannot resolve. There is rivalry that coexists with respect. There is the pain of being dismissed by heroes. There is partnership that sustains despite constant friction. And there is love that was never quite returned. What emerges from examining these 7 relationships is a portrait of an artist far more complex than his public persona might suggest. The rocket man who fills stadiums and commands adulation from millions is also someone who has experienced rejection, loss, and longing. The sequined costumes and spectacular performances have always coexisted with a sensitivity that leaves him vulnerable. Perhaps this is why Elton's music resonates so deeply with so many people. The emotions in his songs are not manufactured for effect. They flow from a life lived intensely, with all the joy and pain that intensity produces. When he sings about love and loss, about loneliness and connection, he draws from reservoirs of genuine experience. These 7 musicians represent not just artistic preferences, but pieces of Elton's soul. Each relationship has left its mark, shaping the man who continues to create and perform decades after first capturing the world's attention. Their stories intertwine with his own, forming a tapestry of connections that illuminates what it means to live a life in music. The controversy surrounding this list fades in significance when considered against the deeper truths it reveals. Arguments about who should or should not have been included miss the point. What matters is the window these choices offer into a remarkable artist's heart. Elton has shared something precious by naming these 7. He has allowed us to see the relationships that made him who he is, complete with their complications and their costs.